The Second World War encompassed far more stories and mysteries than one can imagine. Over the years, new facts come to light that not only add to the known picture of events, but also force us to look at the past from a completely different angle. Today on the FactsRoom channel, we will reveal several astonishing discoveries and incredible findings made in various years after the end of those dramatic events. You will encounter thrilling legends of secret tunnels and lost treasures, unknown accounts of mysterious submarines and ships, as well as the most unusual military operations you may never have heard of. Stay with us until the very end, because we have saved the most unpredictable story for the finale. In the coastal waters near the island of Oahu in the Hawaiian archipelago, the remains of a unique submarine from the Second World War era were discovered. It belonged to the Japanese fleet, was captured by the Americans, and subsequently deliberately sunk. Years later, researchers found it at a depth exceeding 2,300 feet. This incredible discovery made it possible to take a fresh look at the progress of submarine shipbuilding of those times. It refers to the legendary vessel from the I-400 series, the largest submarines built by the Imperial Japanese Navy before the advent of nuclear technology. True giants of the seas, they were longer than a typical football field and could not only undertake long voyages, but also carry small bombers on board. The main idea of the engineers was that the submarine could quickly surface, launch airplanes for a swift attack, and then submerge again before the enemy noticed the threat. Such innovations allowed the Japanese to plan daring raids, often baffling Allied intelligence. Interestingly, in addition to the already known characteristics of these vessels, historians suggest that the Japanese tried to supply their mega-submarines with additional fuel reserves, enabling them to cross huge distances in the Pacific Ocean. The find off the coast of Oahu sheds new light on the details of the final operations, when Japanese crews sought to save surviving vessels or prevent them from falling into enemy hands. In the waters of the Black Sea, off the coast of what is now Russia, the hull of a Soviet bomber that had taken off toward Nazi Germany's positions and disappeared without a trace lay submerged for decades. Many years later, a scientific expedition vessel accidentally discovered its remains on the seabed, sparking genuine interest. Eventually, it was established that this was a rare example of the P-2 dive bomber, famous for its speed and maneuverability. During the Second World War, these machines participated in numerous dangerous missions, often attacking enemy targets almost at close range. No one expected such advanced designs from Soviet aviation engineering. When the bomber's hull was raised from the bottom, the iconic red star, a symbol of an entire era, still remained on the fuselage. Even fragments of the internal lining survived, providing an opportunity to gain a more detailed understanding of how such machines were constructed and refined. Studies of the wreckage indicated that the aircraft might have been shot down by anti-aircraft fire, though experts also cite other possible causes of the crash: technical problems and challenging weather conditions. Additionally, some archival materials suggest that on that very day, Soviet air forces were actively bombing strategic targets, which increased the risk of encountering well-prepared enemy defenses. However, a truly astonishing story took place in the mid-90s, when a sunken example of this legendary piece of equipment was lifted from a river near the city of Veruva. It had fallen through the ice and sunk in January 1945 during the panicked retreat of the Germans. As it turned out, some original parts remained on board, including the gun and other pieces of equipment. Amazingly, after thorough restoration, this SDKFC 251 was once again able to move. It was painted in a characteristic camouflage pattern, authentic inscriptions on its sides were recreated, and even the well-known name Rosie, given to it by its crew, was preserved. Today, this vehicle is one of the most vivid illustrations of the engineering level of those years. as well as proof of how important it is to treat historical artifacts with care. Artifacts that literally come back to life from the depths of oblivion. It is no secret that the Third Reich actively plundered occupied countries and confiscated valuables from Jewish families. The Nazis managed to hide a multitude of works of art, gold bars, and other riches across Europe. When the Hitler regime collapsed, Allied soldiers discovered hidden caches and transports filled with countless treasures. One of the most sensational legends is connected with the Polish city of Walbrzyk, where, according to rumors, an entire train loaded to the brim with gold, precious stones, and even fragments of the legendary Amber Room disappeared in the mountain tunnels. According to local folklore, that is where German soldiers sought refuge when the Red Army was advancing from the east. Allegedly, the train remained in a tunnel dug beneath the castle in Walbrzyk. For decades, people searched for the Golden Train. Some tried drilling shafts, others worked through old documents, but nothing resembling the legendary treasure was found. Nevertheless, enthusiasts do not give up, as new theories and tunnel maps regularly surface. Meanwhile, researchers have established that the Nazis did indeed manage to transport a large number of valuables from neighboring cities. Therefore, the question of whether the train loaded with gold really exists continues to intrigue adventurers from all over the world. The enigmatic term Yamashita's gold has thrilled treasure hunters for many decades. It is named after a general of the Japanese army who commanded the legendary 25th Army during the capture of Malaya and Singapore. Rumor has it that it was under his leadership that the Japanese hid treasures looted throughout Southeast Asia. They say that these countless riches were brought into remote caves, using underground tunnels or specially constructed hiding places in the Philippines. Allegedly, the general planned to return for all of it after the war. However, reality proved harsh. Following defeats in battle, he was never able to take anything out, and he himself was put on trial as a war criminal. Since then, treasure hunters repeatedly attempt to find any confirmation of the legend. It is said that in the mountain regions of northern Philippines, hidden stashes filled with jewels and gold are occasionally discovered, but no one has offered conclusive proof. Skeptics are convinced that all these myths are just another wartime tale. Nevertheless, the unusual markings and remnants of fortifications in the jungle continue to confound adventure seekers. In Uruguay, a highly unusual story unfolded around a bronze eagle found on a sunken German cruiser. This large figure, standing about 6.5 feet tall, once adorned the stern of the ship Admiral Graf Spee. After one of the earliest battles of the Second World War, the ship was scuttled by its own captain near the coast of Montevideo, so as not to fall into Allied hands. Years later, enthusiasts and official authorities organized the retrieval of the artifact. The huge Nazi eagle, clutching a swastika in its talons, instantly stirred up many debates. Some proposed leaving it in a museum for historical context, while others advocated melting it down to destroy the symbol of the totalitarian ideology. Ultimately, a court ruled that the relic was state property and could be sold, with the proceeds to be divided between the government and the team that raised it. As a result, a decision was made to melt down the eagle into the shape of a dove, a symbol of peace. Thus, from an aggressive emblem, a reminder could be born of how crucial it is not to repeat the tragic mistakes of the past. Some historians, however, speak out against this decision since it concerns an authentic artifact of that era. Yet the Uruguayan authorities believe that the symbolism of Nazi Germany should not be memorialized without reinterpretation. On the island of Alderney, which is part of the chain of the Channel Islands, there are unique fortifications, some of which date back to ancient Roman times. Curiously, during the Second World War, the Germans used one of the Roman fortresses, converting it into a fully functional bunker and destroying any trace of its historical appearance in the process. Although the local residents, as well as all British forces, were evacuated after the occupation, the island was not deserted. Labor camps were established there, along with fortifications intended to make this stretch of land impregnable. The fortified Roman fort, which the Germans called Piratenschloss, protected a strategically important coastline. Walls about 10 feet thick and ancient structures formed the basis for German gun emplacements and anti-tank defenses. What is particularly fascinating is that modern excavations have revealed that the Romans had once positioned the outpost in such a way that troops could be quickly transferred to the mainland if necessary. Under the Third Reich, however, engineers hastily added more modern defensive features. The result was an unusual blend of Roman heritage and 20th-century bunker architecture. Now, historians and archaeologists strive to preserve and study these double-layered fortifications as they reflect the dramatic history of a small patch of land at the crossroads of eras and peoples. Imagine a detachment that has almost no weapons but possesses inflatable tanks, mock-up airplanes, and powerful sound systems. That is how the so-called Ghost Army operated. Over 1,100 talented artists, engineers, and sound technicians. Their task was to deceive enemy troops by creating the illusion of the presence of large military forces where they actually were not. The soldiers of the Ghost Army skillfully imitated entire columns of armored vehicles, set up fake guns, transmitted fictitious radio communications, and played recordings of marching regiments. Operations were carried out practically under the enemy's nose, sometimes only about 4 miles from German positions. This tactic confused the enemy, diverting and forcing them to reallocate resources away from the true sites of the offensive. For a long time, the Ghost Army's actions were not revealed to the general public, and it was only years later that it became known how significantly their operations saved American and Allied soldiers' lives. For instance, during the Normandy landings, these specialists set up illusory landing groups, allowing real troops to break through defenses elsewhere. Historians believe that without such operations, the Second World War might have dragged on longer, as each deceptive maneuver had strategic value, significantly enhancing the element of surprise. When researchers conducted deep-sea explorations off the coast of Ireland, they stumbled upon one of the heaviest and deepest troves of precious metals found in a sunken ship. They discovered more than 1,000 silver ingots, with a total mass reaching over 1 million troy ounces of silver. The steamship Garsopa, originally built with a steel hull, sailed under the British flag and was torpedoed by a submarine during the war. Most of its crew perished, and the ship itself sank to the ocean floor early in the 40s. It remained at an almost unreachable depth for all those years. Later, the company Odyssey Marine Exploration took on the search, aiming to retrieve the cargo of silver. Ultra-modern equipment was needed to dive to extreme depths. In the end, the treasure was extracted from the holds, proving that even decades later, enormous riches can lie hidden in the depths of the sea. This became one of the most sensational deep-sea operations of that time. The Kriegsmarine's submarines, widely known as U-boot, posed a serious threat to the Allies, hunting cargo vessels and transports in the Atlantic. Typically, they operated in wolf packs, coordinating attacks via intercepted radio communications and often following their target for several days to gather forces and deliver a sudden strike. However, there were also single attacks, when a submarine assaulted a convoy without reinforcements. Each time they torpedoed a ship, the crew tried to submerge as quickly as possible, as return fire could prove deadly. To confirm the success of their mission, the submariners sent short messages to headquarters about the tonnage they had sunk. Yet many submarines met a tragic fate. About 2/3 of all U-boats were destroyed. One such story is the discovery of the submarine U-576, located for the first time in decades off the east coast of North America. researchers tried to determine whether anyone managed to escape through the hatches or if the crew perished, trapped inside as the submarine went down. Additionally, historians uncovered records indicating that at the time of this U-boat's sinking, Allied escort vessels were actively patrolling that area, attempting to intercept the submarine. It is believed that the successful strike against it was the result of coordination among several escort ships and maritime reconnaissance aircraft. Although the submarine itself may have carried important documents, they could not be recovered before it disappeared beneath the waves. The German encryption machine Enigma was such a complex device for encoding messages that for a long time the Allies were almost unable to decipher the enemy's signals. The variety of settings allowed for billions of encryption permutations. However, the efforts of the talented mathematician Alan Turing and his colleagues in Britain bore fruit. They identified the vulnerabilities of the Enigma and captured German codebooks, provided the opportunity to build electromechanical bombs that could crack even complex ciphers. It is believed that breaking the Enigma was a crucial achievement that hastened the end of the war. The Allies gained knowledge of the movements of the Nazi fleet, plans for offensives, and strategic intentions. Yet, in order to maintain secrecy about the fact they had cracked the code, they sometimes deliberately sacrificed certain ships or cities, not revealing that they possessed sensitive information. As harsh and horrifying as that tactic was, it ensured the source of their intelligence remained secret, allowing them to continue outmaneuvering the German side. An intriguing detail: the discovered Enigma machines are of immense value to collectors today, and some are displayed in museums as a symbol of the triumph of engineering and cryptographic thought, though they were used for entirely opposing purposes. The Japanese battleship Musashi was one of the largest war machines of its time, roughly as long as multiple skyscrapers laid on their sides. Together with her sister ship, the famed Yamato, it was regarded as the pinnacle of the Imperial Navy's engineering prowess. Nonetheless, both ships failed to survive until the end of the war. The Musashi sank during one of the largest naval battles off the coast of the Philippines. Many believed it lost forever in bottomless depths. However, an expedition led by one of the co-founders of a well-known corporation managed to locate the massive hull on the seabed. The researchers used submersibles capable of operating under extreme pressure. On the ship's hull, one can still make out the gun turrets and sections of the deck, badly damaged by explosions and torpedo hits. Interestingly, in one of the Japanese admiral's reports, it was noted just how much the Musashi surpassed the majority of enemy ships in terms of firepower. Its guns could fire at a colossal range, making it a true floating island of death, so to speak. Nevertheless, it proved vulnerable against modern American aviation. Now, found on the ocean floor, it serves a different purpose. It returns an important page of the past to historians and the relatives of those who lost their lives. In one remote corner of Lake Michigan, in the northern part of the United States, a rare example of the Douglas SBD-5 Dauntless dive bomber was discovered. It had lain underwater for many decades, covered in silt, algae, and layers of mussels. Although over time certain parts of its hull were severely deformed, the aircraft was successfully raised and sent for restoration. The Dauntless was highly valued for its ability to dive at extreme angles, sometimes up to 80 degrees. Such attacks were extremely destructive to the enemy, particularly to ships, as they provided exceptional accuracy in bombing. In the Battle of Midway, these aircraft played a decisive role, sinking several major Japanese aircraft carriers. It is worth adding that every discovery of an aircraft relic of this kind not only fills gaps in military history, but also offers restorers a chance to demonstrate how the technology of that era looked and operated. The restoration of the one recovered from Lake Michigan promises to be lengthy, as many parts must be replaced and residual microorganisms removed from the hull. In the end, though, it will undoubtedly become a true jewel of a museum collection, giving visitors the opportunity to come into contact with a living legend of aviation. A sensational story took place in the small German town of Heikendorf. An elderly man kept a genuine Panther tank, an anti-aircraft gun, and even a torpedo in his basement. When these details came to light, the authorities had to call in the military to remove the heavy equipment. Moreover, lawyers spent a long time determining whether the owner should be arrested for maintaining such a dangerous museum. Owning a Panther in private hands is practically unheard of, as this tank is considered one of the best German armored vehicles of the Second World War. It featured enhanced firing speed and good maneuverability. However, it also had significant drawbacks. It was difficult to maintain, expensive to produce, and had some technical shortcomings. It soon became known that a museum in the United States expressed interest in acquiring the tank. The most surprising aspect was that dozens of service members and nearly a full day were required to remove the tank, which lacked tracks, from the cramped basement space. The town's residents were in shock. Most had no idea that their neighbor was hiding a true war-era behemoth beneath his home. While these scrolls are not directly tied to the military actions of the Second World War, the timing of their discovery, in the late 40s, brings us back to the post-war period, when the world was engulfed in reconstruction and the search for lost artifacts. The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest handwritten fragments ever found, discovered near Qumran, by the shores of the Dead Sea. They include hundreds of textual fragments, with some remarkably preserved in nearly pristine condition. The scrolls' contents revealed the religious and cultural features of the community that lived in that region thousands of years ago. Although at first glance, they seem to have no relation to the World War, their discovery attracted global attention at a time when the Western press was eagerly seeking sensational news and extraordinary relics. An intriguing point is that the scrolls gained broad international attention during a period when numerous scholars had emigrated from Europe because of the war. As a result, they came under the scrutiny of multiple academic circles, each attempting to use the textual fragments to support its theories on the development of Judaism. Thus, the scrolls became another artifact of contention, attaining cult status in modern times. Turning to the subject of abandoned military sites, it is impossible to overlook the numerous American bases scattered across Greenland since the Second World War, and used especially intensively during the Cold War. At one time, they built airfields and fuel depots on these strategically valuable icy expanses. However, once certain facilities were no longer needed, everything was simply left behind. Locals call them American flowers, but they are not actually blooming plants. Rather, they refer to the countless rusty barrels left by the military. These barrels lie in heaps, rusting away and releasing harmful chemicals into the soil. And that is not even the worst part. In abandoned buildings containing asbestos and other hazardous materials, the wind roams freely. The local ecosystem, already vulnerable, suffers greatly from this pollution. One situation is particularly pressing at Camp Century, an under-ice base constructed during the Cold War era. Due to global warming, the ice has started to melt, raising concerns that radioactive and toxic substances, which the project designers had intended to bury forever, may become exposed. Now scientists, environmentalists, and politicians are struggling to find a solution, as Greenland remains one of the most fragile regions in terms of ecological balance. All of this took place in a house in England, where, during the repair of a fireplace, they found the remains of a carrier pigeon with a capsule attached to its leg. It turned out that the poor bird, having traversed the dangerous journey from Nazi-occupied Europe, flew into the chimney to rest, but suffocated from the smoke. Thus, it remained unnoticed for several decades. When the capsule was opened, there was an encrypted message on the thinnest paper inside. Presumably, It contained information intended for British sabotage units. During the war, pigeons were used like biological parcels, as they could silently and swiftly cover vast distances. This was particularly important for spies dropped behind enemy lines, since radio transmitters were often too bulky and easily detected by Nazi operators. Experts at Bletchley Park, renowned for their success in cracking the enigma, attempted to decode the message. However, it was so condensed that it has yet to be deciphered, leaving uncertain what secret the pigeon was carrying. Perhaps this piece of history will remain unsolved, but the very fact of its discovery shows just how creative wartime communications could be. These are the astonishing stories that emerged when we examined discoveries from the Second World War and its surrounding context. Each finding described, whether a sunken ship, a hidden bunker, or a treasure legend, reminds us of the immense scale of this war and how profoundly it impacted every corner of the planet. Sometimes, even today, the past suddenly reappears when a long-forgotten submarine is raised from the depths or old crates with unknown contents are discovered in mountain caves. One can never predict what secrets, buried in archives or underground, still await their moment to come to light and upend our long-held views of the past.